Hello and welcome to Insight. I'm Kusum Wijetilleke. My guest today is Ajay Vir Singh, the founder of Colombo Fashion Week and the Ceylon Literary Festival. Ajay, thank you very much for being on Insight. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So we're just coming off the heels of the Ceylon Literary and Arts Festival. And before we discuss that and your role in it, I want to just have a chat with you about what brought you to fashion. And of course, being from India, what brought you to Sri Lanka. So shall we start by how you managed to get imported into
Yeah,
Ireland?
I wish I could say I swam across the Park Street, but that didn't happen. So I came as an expat for an American ad company years ago,
Okay.
28 years ago.
Okay.
But fashion design was, I think, always part of me. So, I think it was something that you're born with, right? So as I came here, while I was working in advertising, I realized that's like 95, 96, 97. I realized that there was a bit of a gap in the fashion industry, so to say. Design was flourishing, but fashion was not really that much there.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, while I'm doing this, I have time. Why don't I explore and see if I could create some sort of a platform? That's how Colombo Fashion Week came into being.
Right.
2002, we started working on it. 2003, we launched it. And yeah, now it's 21 years.
You made interesting distinction there between fashion and design. Can you expand on that?
So yeah, so design is a much wider principle. So you have interior design, you have photography,
Right.
film, architecture,
Right.
different forms of design. But fashion per se was not really. So there was apparel, yeah, textile was there, right? But when I say design, fashion means the active designers creating fashion lines and having retail stores and selling actively. That whole
Right.
thing was missing. So you had one or two wedding designers. I remember Yolande was the first one I came
Okay.
across,
Okay.
and there were few who would do weddings pretty
Right.
much. So there was a huge gap. So there was no fashion curriculums at the time, no fashion retail. Odale was there, but Odale is more like like a stock kind of a retail, not
Right.
really at that
Fashion
time.
at that time.
Yeah. So yeah.
Could you tell us? I mean, you said you started around 2002, 2003, the first fashion week.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, that's 20 years, 20 plus years.
21 years.
How's the fashion industry in Sri Lanka sort of evolved in your sense over this period? And you've been front row to it, essentially.
Yeah, it's pretty much, like I said, first 5 years were dark, pretty much dark period. Nothing was happening. So we're trying to
Right.
figure out when people idea that a next generation or the young generation needs to have a bit of a desire to take up a certain profession or follow a certain line. That's when it starts moving. So otherwise, if everyone wants to be doctor, lawyers, and normal one, the fashion industry won't grow. Apparel industry was there. They were manufacturing, and it's very straightforward. So there were young kids not wanting to be in fashion. So one of the impact of Fashion Week as a platform was that when it was being showcased and amazing designers were being shown, that is when their desire built up in them to say, "Hey, I think I can be one of those guys," right? So then I had parents of kids coming and asking me, "You think our kids can become designers because they want to be fashion designers?" So I said, "Yeah," but then the next question would be, "But where can we study? We can't send them. We can't all send them out, right?" So then you'll see little. So when there was a desire for a young person to go into fashion, the first thing is, can I study it? That's when fashion schools started coming,
Right.
right? So when after out of schools, when the graduates came and started showing at Colombo Fashion Week, now there were consumers saying, "Hey, we want to buy this." So then the fashion retail started. So then they started retailing. Then we brought in craft in. How can we use craft? So now, 20 years hence, Colombo Fashion Week has created the entire fashion ecosystem from schools, from retail, from education to retail, platform, media, right? And I think I would say safely, I can say over 80% of designers you see in Sri Lanka today are the product of Colombo Fashion Week design development system.
Right.
So you take Colombo Fashion Week out, you pretty may not have a fashion design industry. So that's the role it has played as a platform. It was carefully nurtured and created and developed from that perspective as well.
Right. How do you see? I mean, I assume that to be in fashion, you need a fair amount of exposure to fashion around the world. I mean, it's very difficult when you have only one set culture and one set outlook. How have you seen that Sri Lankans have expanded their horizons into? I mean, how have they gone about getting that exposure? Does it have to be someone that comes from abroad, or is there Sri Lankan organic designers that have found a new vision?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's an excellent question because you realize a lot of times that the only thing lacking as of now, after all these years, the design is coming out. There's a unique identity being formed, but what's still missing is the exposure, right? And we're trying very hard. From last year, was the 20th year, we started creating collaborations internationally. So we created 4 collaborations, three in India. Sorry, five. Three in India, one in Dubai, which we're about to do, and one in Singapore. So we're doing an exchange program where Sri Lankan designer showcases there and they showcase here. So now we have moved to the point that so most of the Sri Lankan designers are doing well in Sri Lanka, right? Or pretty much, I would say, big ones are doing well, others are catching up. But I think for them to go into the international space, they need to have exposure. So now these collaborations have started. Last year, we sent 4 designers overseas to showcase there, have retail pop up, so that they feel that how international audience buys them. So what you said is we are just about moving into that phase of exposing them out, so they see how the world is moving in that sphere.
So, having been involved in Colombo Fashion Week for so long, you started the inaugural Ceylon Literary and Arts Festival. I think it just concluded a few days ago. Could you tell us a little bit about it? How was it? How did you manage? I think we had international and local writers, 50-50, poets, and also I think it's different from the Golded Fest because it's got the art component as well. There's a lot of it's different to just being about the writing. So, could you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, no, that's so. I think just before the Araglia started, I think there was no Gaul Literary Festival happening at that time because I think there was a gap. So we, irrespective of that, we started working on this platform, which I kind of studied few festivals, and then obviously I had a chat with Ashok. But before that, I was like Fazina, who's our co-founder. So we had this whole conversation. Okay, what can we create for Sri Lanka that profiles Sri Lanka internationally? Right, which profiles Sri Lanka's art and culture. So we looked at the Edinburgh International Festival, Hay, Jaipur Lit Festival. We realized that these festivals are, though they use the word literature, they're pretty much creative festivals. Yeah, so I said, okay, let us use literature 50%, right, and then bring art, film, music to add to that, and that's how was the composition of it. Idea was very simple. How do we build profile for Sri Lanka internationally? Because tourism is a very important part for Sri Lanka, and we realized that every time tourists come or we go out as tourists, we always get engaged with art and culture, right? So when you have when a destination has a flourishing or a vibrant creative industry or a culture-based creative industry, is very attractive for tourism, very attractive for travelers. So they want to come and watch this, see this, do things. So I thought, okay, if we profile Sri Lanka like that, it will be very attractive for the tourists to come or travelers to come. Then what happens is you'll always see that for investors, every time there's a flourishing, again, my same thing, there's a flourishing and a vibrant creative industry, they always get the confidence that must be a safe place to invest because, the sensitive industry is doing well. So any country around the world where there's turmoil, you see creative industry don't really do well. So it was indirect thing of, okay, it's a good place. It's not so bad. See, there are fashion weeks happening. They have literature festivals happening. There's art festivals happening. So the idea was to profile Sri Lanka at a time when Sri Lanka needed it the most.
Yes,
right?
yes.
That's when we started working on it. It took us 2 years to work on it. Yeah. So yeah, and like I said, the composition was very different, and you want to build on it now, and so it has a strategic initiative. It's a platform like we created for fashion and design, and obviously, like I said, all creative industries are quite integrated. They all have commonality to the whole thing, so it's easy to move from one to the other. So we are good at creating platforms, and we're very good at driving the fashion design industry, and these industries are very, very integrated in the sense that you'll always say, if you look at films, fashion designers play a very important role in films. How your costume is done. You look at art, designers get influenced by art, right? Music, fashion week or fashion thing, when you present fashion has music. So everything is very integrated either ways.
And I think on the retail side, Ajay, especially, I think supply chains are a big part of it. So I suppose platforms like yourselves, building these networks are very essential to the retail aspect as well as the art of it. Right?
Absolutely, because that's what the role of platform. It's a lot of people think, oh, that's a good event. I never do events. I work on platforms. Great. So because platform have depth. Like I said, there's a development aspect to it. There is a nurturing aspect to it. There's media. There's retail. You can integrate craft in it, right? So it becomes a solid platform which kind of drives the ecosystem. Of a society. So that is the whole objective of how we create this and how we're going to take this further.
Right. So I spoke to the curator of the Ceylon Literary Festival, Ashok Ferry, and he made a very interesting point similar to what you're making, that a lot of time a country's sort of soft power comes from their culture and their arts, and that it's sort of how a country can put its best foot forward in a sense. So, and you mentioned it in terms of tourism as well. So what was the feedback like from most of the foreign writers? How did they engage with Sri Lankan artists, and did you get much feedback? Did you feel a good vibe at the festival?
Yeah, no, the vibe was great because that's a good point that you just said. Or so I'm a firm believer of soft power. That's what I always try to put it into people who work with me in their mind that look, we're working on soft power. We influence them with art and culture,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
We like, for example, one of the authors who came was Shribani Basu. She's got a very nice book, says how curry conquered Britain.
Yeah.
So so that's soft power. You want to eat like chicken curry or something. So the soft power plays a very important role. So now the idea was when the authors come here and they work with. So it's very important what kind of a immersion you're giving them,
Right.
right? So we created that from the beginning they landed here. Every small detail, from how we had the fire dancers to things like that, at a superficial level, right? Then at deeper level, the dialogues were engaging, right?
Yes.
So we had a Sri Lankan author most of the time, or a Sri Lankan moderator, having a discussion with them, who have come from across the across the Park Street or across any other country, yeah.
Right.
So that kind of dialogue was very important. Then Ashok created very interesting themes for them to work on. So
Right.
that was really really good. And then like Ashok was the curator for the literature festival. We had three other curators. One was for the art,
Right.
one was for music and film.
Great.
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 So now, so they all their roles were different curation roles. Idea was that okay, literature this time was, I think, 60% was literature. No, 70% weight was on literature. 30% was on the other three.
Great.
Mhm.
Great.
10 in each. But I think next year what we're going to do is we're going to increase that a little more, so it becomes 50 and 50. So then your entire your whole what you call the scope is much wider.
In terms of finance, I assume fashion probably sells a little better than literature. How have you found? I know HSBC came on as a sponsor for this. How is the financing? Because a lot of people make the point that the arts depend on the patronage of finance. So maybe you can make a plea to anyone watching that you need to fund the arts more.
Yeah, no, that's another good question. So normally we have a great relationship with HSBC, right? Because they were with us on the Fashion Week platform 15 years.
Right.
And last year, I think, last year, our 20th year, MasterCard came on board.
Great.
Right? So out of 20 years, 15 years was HSBC. And now there's MasterCard. And so it was easy for me to, convince them, saying, look, art and culture. And companies like HSBC, Dilma, who are with us, like British Council, they are very invested in art and culture. Yeah.
Right.
So their whole value system of the brand is, okay, how can we add value to art and culture of Sri Lanka? So
Right.
but yes, I want to have invite far more companies to come, and corporate brands to come and invest in it, because that's the kind of support we need from them. And it kind of also rubs off on their brands as well. Their corporate brand of they're supporting art and culture. So it kind of softens the image and makes their brand attractive to their consumers too.
Right. Just sticking to the economics of these industries, Sri Lanka's economic collapse and the social issues, consequences of that. What has been the impact that you've seen on literature, art? I mean, it's so important that people have livelihoods, correct? And art is sometimes seen as a pursuit that's foreign to that. That's extra. It's an additional thing. So, are you fearful about arts and design and fashion in Sri Lanka given the economic collapse, or do you think it's an opportunity that there's more potential?
So every time there's a collapse and there's a disturbance of some sort in a country, you'll see always the creative industry suffer the most.
Yes.
Because somehow people, the whole mindset just shuts down.
Yes.
They go back to the rational way of doing things. When there's peace, you want to get engaged in creative activities. So
express yourself more.
Exactly. So it's a very dynamic kind of a nature. So we realized that after the Easter attacks, the creative industry was really struggling. Easter attacks happened, COVID happened, then Araglia happened, so 4 years straight. So it really showed the impact was really severe on the creative industries. Brain drain started happening. People left our own company, people left for Canada and places like that. So we realized that this thing was real. Yeah. So idea was that's why I'm thankful for a lot of brands who stayed with us as partners so we could somehow revive it. Bring the whole thing back. Now one of the reasons we went on this platform of Ceylon Lit, so to say, was okay. Fashion Week is running. What else do we do? Can we give other creative streams a similar support as we gave fashion?
Right.
So that's the reason we went on this. Idea was, can they expand? So when you have platforms like this, even the sales go up.
Yes, yes.
The products sell, yeah, through locals or to travelers who are coming in. So the idea was also to expand their commerce, their commercial aspect.
Right.
Yeah.
Given Sri Lanka's, I mean, I know that you're Indian, but you've lived in Sri Lanka a long time, so you can judge societies to a certain degree. Let's take, for example, the online safety bill that's come out. How do you feel about our society's views on expression and freedom of expression? Do you think there's some movement for us to make? Because having this idea, like we just mentioned, that you're able to express yourself freely is a very important part of art and how it comes into the mainstream. So do you have any fears about Sri Lankan society? Are we starting to be a bit fearful about expressing ourselves?
Well, yeah, it's a perspective, right? I mean, India has it also a little differently.
That's right.
Right.
Yes.
So you can't really go off and say certain things, right?
Right.
So I guess I think even the government it'll reach a certain comfort level where it'll be more open, to realizing. And I feel people also need to find maturity of what they express. Sometimes you express without much depth as matter of fact, right? It may not sometimes make sense. So I guess it requires a balance and maturity on both sides,
Right.
And so I'm not, see, for me, I think more than half my life I've lived here now, 28 years, right? 27 years. And for all practical purpose, I understand this far more than I understand any other country. And having done a lot of work in Sri Lanka, for Sri Lanka pretty much. So I'm quite comfortable in that way.
Tell me a little bit about Sri Lanka's local art scene. And I would say local, but some of the most successful artists in Sri Lanka have made it abroad. Yohani, for instance, with her music.
Yeah.
Shihan Karunatilaka wins the Booker. We had a Tony Award winner as well from the stage. There seems to be a lot of capacity and competence when it comes to the arts and fashion and writing in Sri Lanka. But then as a culture, we don't invest a lot. As a government, we don't invest a lot in the arts. Where does this creativity in Sri Lanka come from?
So, see, creativity is a important aspect. I always say, like, art and culture is a mirror of a society.
That's right.
So it's there, because, it's an ancient society. So will always be there, because how you look at things, how you express is completely come from your, traditions that are there.
Right.
Now, a society needs to have platforms. That's the reason I think I wrote about this recently somewhere. It needs to have platforms that can hold or uphold creative expressions through a different canvas. So art is on the wall, fashion is on the body, interior is around you in a sphere, film is on a screen. So there are various expressions, and as people get exposed to it, right, as they come out, the education get better, they're able to consume this better. When they consume this better, it starts expanding. Now, for example, Yohani found a market in India. It was a huge market, right? So here it was a little smaller. Then Shihan obviously global. So for scaling it, you have to cross the boundary.
That's right.
And that's why both the platforms that we have created, we kind of always encourage how do we cross the boundary. How do we go beyond so most of our platforms that we do here are very South Asia centric.
Right.
Like in Fashion Week, we have India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka effectively showing. Now, same we did with this platform. We invited people from outside. Right. So though it's Sri Lanka based, it brings the best out of Sri Lanka, but it also facilitates knowledge exchange between the two. So that's been the focus for us anyways.
Okay. How have you seen the reaction to Sri Lankan art and design and writing in India? Which is a close neighbor, few cultural similarities, but generally, they are very different to us in a lot of ways, even in their ethos and how they see themselves as Indian, etc. Their sense of national identity. How do they view Sri Lankan art?
So I feel in last 5 years there's been amazing acceptance of Sri Lankan art and culture in India. For example, there was India Art Fair, which is like one of the biggest in the world. So I think our galleries were represented there. Great. I think Saskia Fernando Gallery was there, and one more gallery, MMC, I think, was there as well. So then Jaipur Literary Festival, which is the largest in the world, Shihan was there. Great. And a few authors have been there. So, so suddenly there's an acceptance, right? And I think that's fantastic for Sri Lanka, because India is growing as a country where the population is just getting to not only have Indian art in their walls or Indian creative products, but they're also looking at South Asian, right? And somehow with Sri Lanka, it's moving faster because obviously because of Pakistan, because of issues, they're not able to come in. Bangladesh is there because the Dhaka art fair is there. I think Dhaka art fair that's there. But I think so. I feel in last 5 years, great acceptance, and which is I think is only going to get better.
Right, because that's a big thing, isn't it? Because we have such a big market so close by.
Exactly.
And Sri Lankans have this opportunity because we can relate to their market. It's not a completely foreign market either.
Exactly.
But what I see a little bit is there's a lot of traditionality in, let's say, fashion in India, for instance. There's a lot of, the styles are very Indian. Is there something like, I know there's a few brands that, let's say Lovis Harang, so I don't want to mention too many brands, but then the idea is that there is a way of taking something that's very Sri Lankan and promoting it internationally. That's probably the route that we should be taking, isn't it? Then rather than mimicking something that we see abroad.
Exactly. So like sarong is an interesting way because sarong has different interpretations around the world, right? And some call it lungi, some call it something else,
right?
Now, but how do you interpret it? How can you make it relevant to that place by styling it? Right. So styling it is very important. So and what we really tell designers in Sri Lanka is that don't mimic, create an identity. Because Sri Lanka being an island nation always had more trading opportunities than India had. So influences came far more easily into Sri Lanka. So when it came, you were able to embrace, influences. So with that, you were able to create your product different than what Indians would do, right? So and that could find acceptance in India because it is relevant and yet different. So there's a way to go about it there.
Okay. Just to finish off, I wanted to ask. We talked about Sri Lanka's economic collapse, and one of the consequences is the brain drain, where you have a lot of people from various industries going, and I assume a lot of artists, people who are talented, people who already have made some brand here, they are probably moving abroad for greener pastures. What would be your message to them? And
that like we really suffered through this because a lot of our people left, right? So the idea was I've also changed my whole narrative in last 2 years. I'm really pushing hard on. We have a design college called College of Fashion Design, CFD, which is owned by Colombo Fashion Week, CFW, owned by CFW and SLITI. The idea is that we are saying, okay, let's go beyond just design in terms of creating. Let's have a design mindset. Let's push for design entrepreneurship, because when you have design entrepreneurship in a society, suddenly the young kids or the younger ones find opportunities and hope in creating their new ventures. That's what Silicon Valley does. You see, it has a design mindset. It has anything with design gets launched there. What happens is it's like a creative space where they feel energized to launch something. So if we do this here, design entrepreneurship, that's what we're pushing for. It's a good chance that the brain drain will reverse, because say you find greener, or you perceive that there are greener pastures in say Dubai or places like that, but if you look at it, they're not so green. Right? Because what you need there to launch a brand or launch a venture or do something, you have it here as well. But we haven't held it together and encouraged them to say, hey, just do it, because I know how many people left for overseas. I don't think all of them are happy there.
Exactly.
Right? Only probably 30-40% are happy. Rest are still saying, oh my God, okay, I came, because they jumped on the trend to go. Right? So I wish if I had this platform, say 2 years ago, or the other one 2 years ago, we would have really hammered hard on design entrepreneurship, which would have kind of given them little encouragement to start new ventures, projects, like little hope that I could do more here. And that is the best way to reverse brain drain in any country.
So aside from that, do you have any other advice for Sri Lanka's policymakers in terms of arts and culture, and sort of trying to send them the message that this is a very important part of our country, and it's important for our country's future?
Exactly. I think policymakers really should appreciate that art and culture should be one of the leading drivers. You pick up any country in the world which is doing well currently, pick up any, I challenge. All of them have art and culture at a forefront, because hard power is very difficult to achieve. It needs aggressive amount of money, budgets to do it. Soft power is subtle, but it is impactful because it just starts increasing the influence day by day, right? So like I always say, people think that Mumbai is a Bollywood city, right? But I look at it very differently. Mumbai to me is a soft power capital of India, right? So you have Bollywood, Connected to Bollywood is the food, then you have the producers, the artists, the musicians, the filmmakers, everything. And everyone you think of Mumbai, you don't think it's a commercial capital. You first think is Bollywood, right? And you consume the product of that city, which is the soft power capital of India. That's my perspective on that. So it's time we build soft power in Sri Lanka, and the platforms like we have created are the other ones that are completely dedicated on enhancing the creative value and also the soft power.
Okay. Ajay, thank you very much for being on Insight, and thank you for all your work that you've done, and good luck with Fashion Week and the Ceylon Literary Festival as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.